Vikas, welcome to Focus on the Fun Stuff podcast.
Thank you.
I
love the name, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I am so honoured to have you as one of my first interviews on the podcast. I don't know whether I should be introducing you with your full title.
No.
Dr. Vikas Shah MBE, Deputy Lieutenant.
Yeah, I think that's all of them. I think so.
Yeah, I would love if you could, because you'll do a much better job of me. I would love for my listeners to just understand who you are. I know the start of your journey goes right back to being 14, your entrepreneurial journey. And so a potted history first, Vikas, would be fantastic.
So it's odd because sometimes, doing any kind of interview and, people always say, oh, can we have your bio? And there's always that slightly cringe moment because when I read it, I'm like, that's not me, because that was never the plan. So the plan was really, really simple when I was a kid, which was I wanted to be a pilot. That was it. No negotiation. That was the dream. But it's a really expensive dream. So I was like, well, I have to figure out a way of doing this because there's nothing else I want to do. So I was literally like 13. I started going through the phone book, finding businesses and saying, hey, I'll build you a website or do some design work. So basically a side hustle when I was at school, just trying to make some money to put in the bank to do flying lessons. That was the plan. But then the weird part was that was the start of the first .com bubble, if you like. So that turned into something real. So it went from being this little side hustle to being a real business. And when I was still at school, we then had employees and people in the US and UK and Australia, and it grew really fast, became a sort of global business. And then after the first .com bubble burst, I had to sort of exit the bits I could, basically, and then think about what to do next. And that's when I bought the family's business off them. It was just my dad at the time running a sort of fabrics trading company. To grow that, did some angel investing along the way, and also then started to do a bit more work in philanthropy and also just all the things that I'd sort of parked in my mind as, I'll get to that later, because later's a long way away and who knows if later's going to come. So I sort of tried to make a bit more of a conscious effort to not leave things too late. So it was a very odd journey because I was never interested in business growing up. It was never something that I thought I would enjoy until I started. And then I was like, this is a rush. I want to do this.
Wow. And so just the global, when the website business went global, as you called it, and it had offices in other countries. And so what age were you at this point?
16, 17.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But the weird thing is, so sometimes people ascribe that. So when you hear those stories, it's really easy to ascribe that to some kind of savant level knowledge, but it's not. There's a naivety you have when you're starting out. And particularly when you're A, starting out, and B, still a child, that naivety is really important, because at the time you don't realize it's weird or difficult or complicated. The naivety means, I'll just figure it out and see what happens. And I think that's a really nice thing to kind of bottle, because the further we get on in our career, the more we're acutely aware of risks and what people might think, and there's all sorts of other pressures that come in. But that naivety was really important, because there was no kind of imbued knowledge there. It was just, there seems to be lots of internet stuff happening in the US. Maybe I should do something there. It was literally a very open-minded naivety that I think allowed that to happen.
Because so many people that we speak to in my business, other entrepreneurs I speak to, just so many of them get so closed-minded. Like the fact of going global would just be, it wouldn't even be a thing that's on the Richter scale of being possible to them. So for you to do that at 16, 17
It was weird. So there's a few factors. So first of all, I think it's completely normal to get stuck in the weeds, because every day there's new challenges coming at you. There's a lot to do. And when it's your business, it's anything that happens that day can land on your desk that you have to now sort. So I think it's more common than not to be stuck in the weeds day to day, because that's just life. But then I suppose the decision then is, what do you want? So is it, do you want a good lifestyle business, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that, or do you want to really just grow and see what happens? And if you want to grow and see what happens, then you've got to somehow think about, well, which of those weeds can I trim? What can I not do because I need to make some space to travel or meet people or explore opportunities? And I think again, it was the function of just being naive and sort of thinking, well, let's just see where this goes. So I very actively try to not be too minded in that. The other thing which I find odd is kind of in reflection is, when I was starting out, there wasn't this massive advisor community around businesses. And I think it's really important to find a tribe, whether it's something like Entrepreneur Circle or YPO or TIE or whatever it is. Finding that tribe of other business owners around you is so important. But you then have a layer around that, which is lots and lots and lots of people who are making a business by consulting, advising, whatever. And a lot of them haven't been on the journey. A lot of them can't appreciate the journey and what's needed. And they're actually incentivized to just drag out their engagement with you. And the consequence of that is that they're sucking money off the table, but also it sometimes can scare people and actually slow them down. So there's lots of startups that I've spoken to where they've spent years business planning and seeing business planning coaches and accountability coaches and all these kinds of things, and it stops them actually just making that first phone call, or just getting on LinkedIn and trying to meet a customer and doing the stuff which is actually just really obvious that you need to do early, because there's almost this myth that running a business is really hard. I think it's hard emotionally, it's hard psychologically, it can be hard physically as well, but it's not hard intellectually, because there's no rule book. You just keep learning, you just keep figuring it out, and make sure you've got a good tribe of people around you to support you.
I love that you frame it like that it's not hard intellectually. That's, okay, that is a mic drop for me, that part, because it is literally anyone can do it. Because when I started my business, I was like 26, 27, and I was very aware that I didn't have all the skills at all, and I needed to learn and just keep trying.
And there's definitely things which I would always recommend people learn, and that bit's never been easier. So, just the basics around business finances, all those things, like the basics around HR, like that stuff, if you know it, it's great, because usually what'll happen is the minute something escalates, you can get your accountant or advisors in as you need. But I think, what you said there is so common, which is people like, well, I don't know enough about it to get started. But then, as you've experienced and actually seeing your growth with the business has been amazing, it's the running the business bit isn't the hard bit. The hard bit is getting on the phone, making that first sale, bringing your team together, how to motivate them, and that's also the bit where you're just giving everything of you to everyone else in the business, really. But ultimately, it might sound a bit trite, but as long as you can, there's for those listening, there's a lovely little plant on the table between us, and as long as I can make that for less than I can sell it for, there's a business. I mean, it's literally that simple. And over intellectualizing it makes it really hard for people to get started.
Mm-hmm. And can I just ask, when you were in the first business at 16, 17, it was going global, in terms of team, because that is one step that lots of self-employed or business owners find really hard. It's like scary getting someone else with them, training, motivating, paying them. So to go global, you must have had, well, I'm assuming a team, a sizable team, or like at 16, 17, how did you recruit, put people in the right roles?
So it was weird because, again, in retrospect, it's very odd. But then at the time, I was working on the principle of, I'm 16, 17, I don't know anything, but I need to find people that do. And I just reached out to, people that I thought could be very good, whether it was at an agency or somewhere else. And I was very honest and said, hey, we're still quite a new business. Here's what we've achieved. Here's the kind of people we've worked with. I'm still figuring it out as we go along, but I think there's an opportunity here. And I don't know what you're doing at the moment, but if you want to have a chat, I'd love to have a chat with you. And it's strange because I haven't really changed that approach since, because I think you've got to connect on a human level first. You know, you've got to think, is that someone that I want to work with? Is that something that I can get on board with? And then you can put all the gloss over it. But so I try to just reach out to people like that. And some people were kind of, you know, like, oh God, no, you're a child, no, go away. And some people were like, well, there's something in this, and maybe I should just take a chance for a while and see what happens. And then when they gave, you know, that faith to me, and I was able to figure out a way of making it work financially, and that was actually a function of asking them what could they bring to the table, and then thinking about, well, how can I make my business sprint to afford some of their time? So, you know, the first time I brought on a sales lead for the business, you know, first very expensive hire, and I was like, okay, well, I need to just find out how can I cover 4 months of their salary and expenses and infrastructure. So I stopped taking anything. I went on a massive sales sprint myself, just tried to pull in as much work as I could. So I had enough in the bank to cover that 4 or 5 months whilst we figured out what happened. And I was very honest with them and I said, here's what I'm going to do to make sure that that's covered, but then I need you to deliver. And so that kind of open transparency, I think, was really important to get those people on board early. You know, when you get bigger, it's sort of easier. You know, like now, you know, I can imagine for you when you're recruiting, you've got, you know, all those years of pedigree in the business. There's a great team. You've got people out there who've worked for you, who said, this is a great place to be. But those early days are really hard because people have choices and you're not the obvious choice.
Totally. And the part about being open, transparent, honest, I found that the more you do that, the more, because there are tough times in business, tough times that staff will see as well, and the more they will pull with you, move in the right direction at the same time. And
it's also, it's not the obvious things that motivate people. Mm-hmm. You know, the assumed consensus is that it's about giving people 4 days a week and, you know, unlimited holiday and bean bags and whatever, but that, you know, if people connect with the values and the mission of what you're trying to do, that will motivate them beyond anything else. And you've got to obviously pay people right and benchmark it and give people the right flexibility and benefits, but there's no substitute for that. And that's why you end up with some businesses where you have staff that are there for 20 plus years mm-hmm. and 30 plus years because they consistently connect with that mission. And then some businesses where their staff turnover is really high because they might be kind of fun and exciting, but there's no deep connection there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I love that. The journey, this just sticking with this part of your career when you had the website business, I just want to touch on, because Focus on the Fun Stuff podcast is all about helping business owners enjoy the journey. Yeah. And I know that from the outside, your career, it's just amazing to understand and look at, but I know that personally you've had some really tough challenges. I recently watched your TEDx talk and it's had like 120,000 views now, and it's titled How to Save Your Own Life, because I understand that you had suicidal ideation. And so just at that, I would just love to understand a bit more about what led to that. In terms of how you were running the business. Was it how you were managing your own time? Was there no time left for Vikas anymore? Just what led to it?
So I'll give you an analogy to start with, and it's only because it popped into my mind because before we started recording today, we bumped into each other at the cafe outside, and we were talking about things like triathlons and all that. And you know, if you are doing any endurance activity, so let's think of a marathon. Let's say you're doing a marathon, you're going to get tired and you know there's a finish line, so you'll push through and that's okay. And you'll probably have some recovery before you do your next one. But those first few miles, as much as it's an effort, you're okay, you're fine. And then it just gets, the toll builds and builds and builds. Now, obviously a marathon's quite a compressed length of time, because I know you probably do yours in like 2.5 hours or something. But
I wish.
But if you think about running a business as being a bit like a mental version of that, mm-hmm. not at the same pace, so it's not about timescales of hours, it's more probably about timescales of months or years, but the intensity's there all the way through. And so you're grinding away, building, you're not looking after yourself necessarily because you can't stop to rest, you're just doing all this, and then before you know it, your mind's just burned. And that then sort of becomes anxiety, and then you end up sort of self-medicating by maybe having a drink or going out or just doing whatever, and then that sort of doesn't help. And then the problem is there's not really a sense in the wider business community of saying to someone, hey, you need to probably rest, it's probably good for you. Everyone's like, no, you should sleep at your factory and do all this. It's really unhealthy, because if I look at the people that I know that have been really super successful, none of them have done that. Even in the early days, they've really taken care of themselves and their mental health and physical health and nutrition and all that, because it kind of makes sense. If you're not the highest performance version of you, you can't be that for your team. And what I found was, I thought it was just work stress that was anxiety inducing. I'm like, well, of course I'm going to be anxious. It's work. But it got worse and worse and worse. And I did the classic thing of not thinking it was medical and just thinking, oh, I can solve this with a seminar, or I can solve this by doing whatever, But it's a medical thing. Like, you injure yourself. Again, you do the marathon, you get an injury. If you get an injury in a marathon, you don't sort of sit in a gong bath, you go and see a physio. So with a mental injury from overexertion for 15 years, I should have just gone to the doctor and said, hey, this is a problem, what do I do? But I didn't. And that got worse and worse and worse, to the point where, as you said, there was suicidal ideation. I tried 4 times, and one of them got very close. And actually that's what it took for me to kind of go, maybe I should do something about it. And then I kind of went and saw therapists and got the meds, and then started to rebuild. But it was really the thing that annoyed myself. I said the thing that I find sort of frustrating in my own mind was, it's not rocket science. It was things like, oh, mindfulness is really good. It helps you focus, helps you manage stress. Oh, maybe you should look after what you eat and train every day and sleep well. It's all the stuff that we're told to do, which we always think is for someone else, not for us, because we're high performance people. So it doesn't matter for us. It's for somebody else to think about that kind of thing. But it really, really matters, because ultimately, without looking after yourself, you can't do your job well. And the people who often are telling you to be as part of, doing this grind culture, they're the ones selling the book on the grind culture. They're not the ones who've actually been there and done it. Now, there are exceptions, by the way. There's periods in every business's life where it's just tough, right? Like, we've had periods where we've been in sale transactions, we've been buying businesses, or there's a major project where it's just tough. You're going to have to work every possible hour. It's going to be really intense. You're not going to sleep well. You're going to be traveling. You're going to be eating rubbish airport and airline food. And that's okay, as long as you then program in your downtime afterwards. And the thing that I found really surprising is, again, when you're in it, you think you're the only person. You think that everyone else is swimming around and doing fine, and you're the only person struggling. And then, I don't remember when it was now, but it must have been at least 7 or 8 years ago. I was doing one of those breakfast panel interviews. There's a few of us on a chair, and we'd all been sent the questions in advance, to think about our answers. And one of the questions was, well, that's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur. And, I was thinking of all these stock answers, but on the day, I was having a very bad brain day. I was just really tired. And I was like, do you know what? It was having a decade of anxiety and depression. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. Because the weird thing is, everyone's always saying, oh, there's a taboo. There's no taboo. It's just we don't talk about it. There's a big difference. A taboo is something you're not allowed to talk about culturally. So in lots of cultures, there are still taboo subjects about sex or whatever. Oh, don't talk about that. But there was no taboo around this. It's just people didn't talk about it. That means we don't have a language for it. It means we haven't socialized discussing it. It doesn't mean there's a taboo. But then the minute I sort of said that in the event, I had a few people on LinkedIn saying, oh, I'm really glad you said that, because I've been going through it, and I thought it was maybe just me. And that just made me think that actually this is a really important thing to discuss. And what made me quite sad was I'd had people message me after the event saying, oh, I've never really wanted to talk about it because I was just worried about what people might think, and I'm up for a promotion and I don't want to talk about struggling because I might not get it. And And it just made me realize that if I've been lucky enough to sort of get to a point where I don't need to worry about what people think, I can just talk about it. And hopefully it means that somebody else who maybe owns a business won't judge someone who's going through that.
Totally. And am I right in saying that in that decade of anxiety that you just mentioned, that from the outside, and like you would have been a highly functioning Vikas running your business.
From the outside, no one knew. My staff, my closest friends, no one had a clue. And to the extent where there was one particular day where I'd, try to, as I put it, sort of do something silly, early hours of the morning. I was still in the office at 7:30, still in a meeting.
Really?
Like nothing had happened. And but this is just, but that's just a weird part of how you run a business, because, for example, we're sat in this lovely studio having a very nice conversation. I don't know if you've got some massive burning platform on your business. Before we came into this, you could have checked your phone and had some egregious HR matter land on your desk where you're like, what am I going to do? Or a major client say, oh, hey, we're just going to put everything out of a tender. But you adapt to go, I'm going to park that and deal with this. And that's part of the thing you just sort of adapt to when you're running a business, right? So it's not that you're necessarily putting a face on or acting. It's just, you're going to park that for later because for now I've got this job to do. And that's the weird thing, because you're sometimes in situations where you internalize it so much you don't realize how it impacts on other people. So, for example, let's say I'd come into this podcast today and let's say I'd had some really tough news just before. There's two ways I can deal with that. I can either ignore it, park it and get on with it, or just before we go on air, I could say, hey, just had a bit of challenging news in the business. So if I'm not myself, just bear with me. And that means you can respond better and we can help each other through that. And so that's the approach that I try and take in meetings and try and encourage my team to take, because you don't need to act it. You don't need to give everyone all the warts and all detail, but you can just say, oh, hey, I've just had something and blah, 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 and just bear with me. No one's going to judge you for that. It just means that they can understand your context. Because, again, let's go back to that scenario. I could come on air today, have had something really challenging happen, be a little bit spiky in the conversation or be a bit withdrawn in the conversation, and you and your listeners are like, he's a bit of a weirdo. But if people understand the context, and they're like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense now. And that's one of the main reasons why, we absolutely just have to be a bit more open. In the same way that if we'd have walked in the room here today and let's say you'd done a marathon yesterday and you were hobbling a bit, you would have just naturally said, oh, sorry, I'm hobbling a bit. I did a 23-mile run yesterday. Fine. Anything I can do to help? That's the bit of the conversation that's missing.
I totally agree. I was about to ask you just before about, okay, what would be some top tips to help? But I think like that has just nailed it in terms of sharing the problem.
So you've just got to give people a bit of an insight into the context, because one of the things that you learn in therapy, of which I think I'm probably a black belt now, is you only have your mind to deal with. So you're always thinking about you as you. What you don't do is imagine you're sitting next to yourself looking at you. So sometimes it's thinking about, rather than being on the inside looking out, it's sitting next to yourself and going, well, how does Vikas look in this situation? How is he behaving? What am I picking up? And being that external observer really helps you in how to interact in different situations. You might think, oh, I'm just checking my phone, but it can make people think you're very disinterested in a conversation. You might, it's all those sorts of things which being an external observer really helps you understand. But the other thing I think, which is really important, is running a business is really, really, really hard. It takes its toll on you. It doesn't matter whether it's a tiny business. It doesn't matter whether it's just you or whether it's a giant business. It's hard. Yeah. And I think personally, it's a really good idea for all business owners, even if it's once or twice a year, go and see a counsellor. Just have a conversation. Let it all out. Let all the fears and worries and everything that you would never tell any of your team out to a professional. Because that professional can listen to you and you're sat there going, wow, you know, what if I'm a failure? Have I made the right choice? I'm not enjoying my business. What do I do? You know, these are things which go through your head, but you just bury them.
And do you think, because I mean, some business owners won't talk to anybody at all, or that some business owners who maybe have joined a mastermind or a group and they will share with other business owners. Do you think there's a difference there in business owners giving other business owners advice as opposed to just talking to a counsellor who's not running a business?
I think there is a huge and really important difference. Having that peer group around you of other business owners is really important for you to just feel seen and get some really useful insights from other people that are on the journey. But whether we like it or not, and it's not because of who we are as individuals, it's because of who we are as a species. We're a hierarchical little species. And when you're around a group of your peers, everyone's flexing a little bit, right? And it's a very rare group environment like that where you can let out all the darkness that you build up as a business owner. The reason counselors and psychologists are really useful is because they're trained to listen to you. They're trained, it doesn't matter what your situation is, they're trained to listen to you and connect it back to how you arrived at that thought and how can you process that better or deal with that. Or what does that mean? And that's a very important, deep thing you have to get around. Like I've had lots of friends that have run businesses into the ground because they didn't enjoy them and just never had that conversation, or friends that have sadly, you know, departed the mortal coil, as it were, because they were just really stressed and never talked to anybody. And this is the stuff where, even if it's a couple of times a year, I think it's really useful.
Yeah. And the friends that have run them into the ground, is that more of a self-sabotage almost, do you think?
I don't think it's self-sabotage. And again, you know, I can't speak for someone else's life experience, but I think personally it's just, if you don't enjoy it, this is too hard a job to do it if you don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because you give everything to it. And I mean, you know, you're missing important family events. You're, you know, evaporating relationships with friends and sometimes real relationships. And, you know, your business has to become the center of your life in a way that nothing else does. And you've got to really want that because it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Vikas, I just wanted to I wanted to talk about your blog. When did the blog start?
2007.
And that became a book. The blogs, thought economics, I should say. And I just we talked about it briefly in the coffee shop earlier, in that I was saying how I do feel like a lot of business owners, they will get stuck in their own head about moving forward, about making a bold move in life, about asking for things. And as I've known you for a really long time now, but as I was researching you over the past weeks and looking at the blog that you had started, where you have interviewed some of the most successful, famous, impactful people in the world, how that actually started. So I would love you to, because I just think business owners can take so much from what you did, which is quite a simple thing in lots of ways, but lots of people don't do it. So I would love to tell us a bit more about that.
So I think skill number one for any business owners is selling, because that's how you start. You know, you start by getting that first meeting. And so what happens? So the really quick story was early. So my first business, we had a publishing arm. So we created something a bit like WordPress before content management was a thing. And our concept demonstrator for that was a magazine online called ISR, which became Indonesian. And the team reviewed all sorts of things like games and all sorts. You know, it was very much more of a kind of just like a typical reviews magazine. Anyway, and I kind of enjoyed it, so I sort of missed that a bit. And then early 2000s, a lot of the content that I enjoyed, the kind of long form content, went, and it was replaced with kind of infographics and short form. And I was like, I kind of missed that. So I created a free blog on Blogger, as it was, which got bought out by Google. And I just thought, hey, I've met some interesting people over the years. Let me interview them. get half an hour and just find out a bit about them. You know, there's people I would maybe meet for a coffee anyway. And then I was like, this is kind of fun. And then I thought, well, who else can I get to? And I reached out to Jimmy Wales, who founded Wikipedia. Just, you know, what have you got to lose? And he replied, and he was like, oh, this sounds fun. I'd like to give you a chance. He goes, but the questions you've sent are really awful. Have a think about them. But yeah, I'm happy to do it. And I was like, wow. And then guess what? Once you've had Jimmy Wales on, you think, like, oh, who can I get next? And then I was like, oh, you know, maybe I can get Buzz Aldrin. And, you know, his team responded, and I've maybe caught their publicist on a good day. And they went, oh, this sounds like an interesting project. Sure, we'll give you a bit of time. And
wow.
And this is the thing, you know, in all my outreach emails, I was really honest, and I said, hey, you know, Thought Economics, this is my project, this is why I'm doing it, still brand new, still tiny, I'd just like half an hour of your time. You know, you can read it before it's published if you don't like it, it's fine. But, you know, totally understand you're busy, but I just thought I'd ask. And, you know, hundreds of people never replied, but some people did. And even though Thought Economics has always been a hobby, it's never been a job. I never want it to be. You know, the rejections on that hurt just as much as rejection in business. So if I craft an email to somebody and try to interview Emma Mills and never hear back, or just get one of those boilerplate publicity responses of, you know, it's not for us right now, it kind of hurts just as much as any business sale.
Yeah.
But to this day, the point is, I have no business interviewing these people. I'm not a journalist. This isn't a major newspaper or podcast or something. So I've got no business getting their time, but I can still do it because I ask. And I'm honest with my ask. And a lot of people will say no, but sometimes I'll say yes, and that levels you up every time. So that was kind of the sort of challenge to self. Then the other side of it is the learning. So you know, people talk about serendipity like it's a fairy tale concept, but there's actual science. So there's an actual science of serendipity. And the science talks about how the outcomes people have in life are tied to the inputs people have in life. So if the only thing you've ever done is build walls, chances are you'll be very good at building walls, but not much else. But if you build walls, but then read philosophy and do all these other things, chances are you might see an idea that nobody else has done, or you might see a way to move forward that you've not thought about. And so the science of serendipity really ties to the fact that the number of dots you have on the page correspond with the patterns you make joining the dots, right?
Wow.
So for me, Thought Economics has also been this amazing learning experience, because I can talk to people who do everything. You know, it might be arts or sports or topics that I didn't know of, or topics that I wasn't particularly interested in, and learn something. And it's funny because in the last few years, I get asked to go and do the occasional lecture or whatever. And I kind of say to the students, yeah, I'd probably not read business books. Like maybe read some, but just read about anything. Like art, sports, science, autobiographies, fiction, whatever it is, because the more diverse the stuff is going in, the more innovative the stuff is coming out. And it's that kind of really basic principle that's been amazing for me with Thought Economics. You know, I get half an hour with some of the most amazing people on the planet and just get to ask them whatever I want. And it's like the best education, and it's just been really fun, but it's firmly a hobby.
I love that. I mean, just the fact that you've asked, I just want to like really re-emphasize that, because just most people will just stay in their own box, won't they? And they might have ideas or think, you know, like the whole thing of what would you do if you weren't going to fail? And then people might, well, I would really do this. But people don't do the things, do they? And
a lot of the time that ask is not a big ask. So it might just be that you have an idea that you think is a good idea, and you're like, I don't know, you know, maybe should I do this? And it might be that you just reach out to 10, 15 people on LinkedIn or something and say, hey, look, you know, can I just get 5 minutes on a call with you? I've got this business idea and I just need some advice. Or, you know, it might be that you want to change career and you reach out to someone who's doing that job and say, hey, I love what you do and I would love to do that. Can I just get a few minutes of your time and just learn about how you did it? Because I'd love to. And, you know, some people are just really busy or they might not reply, but some people might be like, oh, hey, yeah, sure, you know, I'll give you 10 minutes. Let's have a coffee and a chat or a Zoom or whatever. but you don't know unless you ask. And it is scary, and it's not nice, and it's not nice when people don't write back, and it's not nice to get fobbed off, and it's not nice to put yourself out there. And that's all true, but you have to. I don't like going to networking events, but I have to. It's just one of those things that you have to do and you have to adapt to.
Yeah, no, totally agree. There's so much good stuff in that, Vikas. Thank you very much. I just wanted to move on to like the second business. So when you had the .com business, you exited parts of that. So then you bought Swisscot from your family and grew that. So I just wanted to touch on like all of the difficult period that you went through, the 10 years of anxiety. It didn't stop you from going again. You then went into Swisscot.
Yeah.
And so I see that like the late like 2015, 2019, you were lecturing in Lisbon.
Yeah.
Every fortnight. You are at the NED of many businesses. You're trustees. Like the learnings that you took from the first portion of that business life, just what did you do differently? Or because your life was still going at 100 miles an hour, from what I can see, like how did you then make sure that didn't happen again?
I mean, I'd love to say that I took in lots of learnings and applied them, but I didn't. I just went head first into it, and I shouldn't have done, because it caused even more burnout. I think what was different was, I think I'd matured more as a business owner, and so I was more able to delegate. I was more able to get out of the way of the team. I was more competent at doing the job. And you can't ever learn that from a book, by the way. You've just got to do it and feel it. Like there's loads of, I'll give you a really silly example, but there's loads of books that'll tell you about, how to fire someone gently and what it's like in the process. But none of those books will teach you just how horrible it feels and the anxiety before the first time you need to let somebody go.
Yeah.
You just got to feel it, and then you do it, and you get through it, and that's the experience bit. So I think because I'd had like 10 years under my belt doing it, there's an extent to which you do become a bit more mature in your approach. So that was important. And then with that business, because I knew nothing about the industry, I'd poached in a management team. And I think this is the benefit of capital as well, because at the time, rather in the first business, I had to sprint the business every time to hire somebody and really dig in and do that.
Wow.
But I came into this business with some capital on one side where I was like, okay, well, let me just go out and make those hires and then let them build the business plan. So kind of poaching key people from businesses that were in the market and saying, hey, look, I want you to design what success looks like.
Yeah.
And then I'll get out of your way and just back you and back the business and provide strategic input. So I think inadvertently, I'd created that slightly more executive chair role from day one. But the power of brilliant people that's what gets your business to scale. You just give them the environment and conditions to do that. So that was important. And then I think, as you said, in probably the last 5 or 6 years, I've done more non-exec work and other bits, and that's also part of keeping the tools sharp, because your business has been around a long time, so it's no doubt a very well-run business, but your business. Whereas when I do non-exec work, it's a bit of time out of the business now and again, but I'm seeing how someone else does it. Mm-hmm. So I get to go and look inside another business, really deep into another business and go, well, how are they approaching this? And you get to meet people who are just doing amazing work. So, when I'm a non-exec in a government department or in a massive corporate business, I'm getting to work with the very, very best people, who are doing incredible work, and I can take some of those learnings back with me, but also bring them some learnings from being an operator.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of business owners don't give themselves the credit of the fact that they use a word like generalist in a sort of slightly demeaning way. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm a bit of a generalist, but it's not. Like, the skills you have had to learn in so many domains to run a business is pretty extraordinary. And for example, like today, if you went to any non-profit or a corporate, you could transform them, because you've run a business, you've built it, you've run teams, you've built culture, And those learnings are absolutely priceless. You cannot get them anywhere else. You can't go on a course and learn them. You can't get them from a book. You can't get them from a coach. You've got to do it.
I do think that as business owners, we're not very good often at being our biggest fan, are we? We can do more self-critical talk than actually, you're doing good. You're learning all these skills you have. You know, it's, I think that can be a problem for a lot of business owners.
I think the problem is, though, that if you were also the sort of person that was good at being positive about yourself, you probably wouldn't then be hungry.
True.
Because I know there's an extent to which I'm very, very glad for the anxiety, because if I wasn't slightly introverted and slightly anxious and not really particularly confident, I don't think I would have built a business.
Really?
Because, you know, if you're building a business, you're running from something.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something there.
Yeah.
There's some demon you're running from. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, everyone's got a different one, but there's something that you are running from that means that you're prepared to put in that level of fight. And that's okay, by the way. Everyone has demons.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Just you mentioned non-profits, and I know we're coming to the end of our time. I just wanted to ask you one question, because I can see that in your business career, like corporate social responsibility, working with non-profits, like you've been or are the trustee of Mustard Tree. I saw that you were a trustee of Chester Zoo.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Which is amazing. There's been so many things that you're a part of, and I feel like I know you talk a lot about that being a part of business, like business doing things for good. And I think that a lot of business owners won't think of that because there's just so much going on all the time, and they think, God, got enough to do. I haven't got time for that as well. And I just in that kind of, if somebody's in that kind of mindset, just what impact it's had in your business career, in enjoying the journey as well, just what that's been like.
So, you know, and I say this with love to an audience who are probably all on the journey, but we all know that the minute we use a lame excuse like I don't have time, that doesn't fly, because if something's sufficiently important, you'll make time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's things like, you know, like I know you like to keep fit and train, and you make time. You know, you are very, very, very busy, but you make time because you know it's important. And like that's bottom line number one. If you believe something's sufficiently important, you'll make time and you'll figure it out. And the second part of it is, you know, there's always got to be that thought in the back of your mind about like why am I doing this? And, you know, do you want to be the richest person in the graveyard? Probably not. I think that's a bad way to go. Do you believe that everything you have in life is because you damn well deserve it? Or do you realize that there's a massive amount of luck? You know, you won the genetic lottery by being born somewhere where you can progress and not being this, you know, the majority of human civilization where that's really not an option. That if you've been able to extract some money out of society into your business, you kind of, you know, that's been as a result of society being good to you. Mm. So you kind of owe it, you know. You're on the shoulders of lots and lots of people, you know. So there's a humility that means that you probably should do something. Doesn't matter what the something is, but you should do something. But then also, charities need business skills. Like, they don't just, you know, they need your money. That's obviously important, but they really, really, really need your business skills, because as a business owner, like, you know how to sell, and you can go into a charity and work with their fundraisers and say to their fundraisers, right, fundraising is basically selling. Here's some ways I've done it. Here's how you can approach it. Here's how to change your deck. Your deck doesn't currently communicate well with businesses. Here's what you can do. And before you know it, you've helped that charity go from earning 100,000 to 500,000 a year in donations. Great. What an impact. You've not had to write a check. That's the kind of impact you can have on a charity. And I know, for example, if you went into any charity today, I guarantee you could probably double their income just with what you've learned in sales alone. And that's something that'll outlive you. And then the other part of it, which is the unexpected learning, is charities do a massive amount with nothing. And so whenever you're sat there in your business worrying about the resources you have to do something, you realise that a charity like Mustard Tree, with quite a moderate annual income, supports 10,000 people a month in Greater Manchester. And you're like, well, how do they do it? And they do it because they have an incredible culture, they have a mission, they have a great brand, they tell their story well, they genuinely do something that people want and need. So they're still business principles.
Yeah.
It's not that it's some mythical place, but when you see how charities adapt to doing so much with such limited resource, that can bring a lot of learnings back into your own business. So let's say that, Emma, you go into a charity and spend half a day with them and transform their fundraising process. You'll probably take as much away with you back into your business as you've given them. And that's a really beautiful thing. But the stuff that you do in the non-profit sector, and I call it that not because it sounds fancy, but because it's social enterprise, it's charity, it's all these different things now, that is the stuff that outlives you.
I have never ever thought about it being like a transfer of skills both ways, the way you've just highlighted that, of how they do so much with so little.
Charities are probably the best boot camp of building culture. Because think of it this way, a charity will recruit somebody who could probably get a job for twice the money somewhere else. So they're paying people less, working them harder, they have no resource, and they're having to do really, really hard, complex things every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they're living hand to mouth a lot of the time. A lot of that is tied together because the charitable sector really deeply understands how to build effective working cultures.
Yeah.
And we can all learn from that by observing it and being part of it. But the bit that sector needs more help with is business and governance and all the things that we sort of take for granted. Like if I said to you, you might say to your team, right, let's do 20 new clients this month, for example. You kind of take that for granted. It's just what we do. But if you go to a charity fundraiser and go, right, we need 20 new donors this month, that's kind of really hard. But you can teach them what you know. And in turn, they can teach you what they know about culture and building a team. And it is a really wonderful partnership. The question, let's go a step back. There is a question, though, which is, what do you want out of life? And there's no right answer here, by the way. Person A might say, do you know what? I just want lots of money and I want a boat and that'll make me happy. Cool, you do you. Person B might say, I want to have lots and lots of babies and have a great big house and have grandkids and just do all that. And I want to focus on them. Cool, that's great, do you. Person C might go, I just don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard. That's fine, do you. So there shouldn't be any obligation on you to do anything, nor any judgment. I've got plenty of friends who've sold their businesses, bought lots of nice cars and a boat, and they are living their best life, and they do nothing for charity. Fine, you do you.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. I don't care. You do you. And what annoys me sometimes is the judgment factor, because you forget that person probably created thousands of jobs in the process. They've done their bit for society. They've paid lots of tax and whatever. But as long as you're doing what your aim is. So for example, So in my life, I've decided not to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a real chance of being the richest person in the graveyard. Right? Because if you've got kids, it's a bit different.
Yes.
You've got a chain, you've got a legacy, you've got like a path. But if you don't, then what? Right? So this is a very real possibility, and that's a very sad possibility, but I can do something about it.
Uh-huh.
And also, it's fun and it's interesting. For example, I was the chair, so helped launch and start an international NGO called In Place of War. And it was a spin out from the university. And it came out of a lecture where one of the professors at the University of Manchester gave a lecture on why do people make art in conflict zones? And I'd never asked myself that question. But it's kind of true, because whenever you see a war report, there's some cool graffiti in the background and art. And then I was like, why do they? And he'd done all this research on how art is the best way for people to communicate what they're feeling in war and to build peace between cultures. Wow. So I then sort of hounded him and said, we need to do something. So we launched In Place of War. I stepped down as chair in January just gone, and In Place of War is now in 42 countries, works in conflict zones using art to do peace building work, and then that follows with social entrepreneurship and things. But imagine, through the work with In Place of War, I've had the chance to go to war zones and go to places of conflict and go to South Sudan and go to a minefield and go to the sorts of places where I would never have even dreamt of going, or probably would have been too scared to go. And you can't help but be a different person when you come back. Also, I'll give you one really quick story. So we all have people that we don't like in life. So bear that in mind. Bear in mind that somebody may have some point in your life wronged you. Now, we're in Uganda, which has just come out of civil war, maybe a decade or so ago. And in the north, so the south of Uganda is quite well developed. It's very cool. You'd love it. It's amazing fun. North of Uganda is still pretty rural, pretty, there's still landmines and stuff around some places. We're on a farm and went to visit this lady on the farm, and we're chatting to her, and her sons had been killed in the civil war by the rebels, and there were some young men tilling the fields, and I said, so who are they? Because I thought, are they family? And she went, no, they're just in the community. They might have been rebels, I don't know. And I said, so they could have been part of the gangs or the rebels that actually killed members of your family? And she went, yeah, but the war's over now and everyone deserves a chance.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it's all well and good me telling the story, but you need to feel that stuff. And that's what the charitable sector gives you. When you sat in front of someone who's been in jail for 16 years and has turned their lives around, or someone who's homeless for 5 years because something happened in their lives, but they've been able to pick themselves up and get on with it, you don't get that perspective anywhere else.
Wow, Vikas, I've been transfixed through this whole podcast. I've learned so much in the past hour, and I'm sure everybody listening to it will as well. I just want to thank you for being my very first interview and being absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, and congratulations on everything you're doing, because it's been so amazing seeing your story and how your business is going from strength to strength. And I think the way that you communicate and give people an insight into your business and how it runs and what it really means and how you're building that tribe around you and what you're interested in and how that helps you, I think that's really powerful, because people will be very inspired by that. So thank you as well for what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Vikas. That was amazing. Awesome. Thank you very much. I feel like you made it so effortless.
No, you did. You're very